Welcome, everybody. For those of you who aren't familiar with me, my name is Zach Basner. I'm a digital sales and marketing coach here at Impact. I've personally coached over 100 companies to achieve what we call digital sales and marketing mastery. Everything I share with you in these sessions is what I see firsthand from the companies that I work with. Of course, we're joined by many Impactors today, but we're also joined by my partner in crime, Nick Bennett. Nick, I'll let you introduce yourself for those of you who don't know.
Thanks, Zach. Hey, everyone. I'm Nick. I'm the director of demand here at Impact. And so I'm Zach's right-hand man for these events moving forward. So we're going to have some fun and we're going to talk about a lot of cool things. And we hope you enjoy it.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Impact, we are a sales and marketing training company. We have a team of around 60 coaches and trainers that are at any given time working with about 75 or more companies, helping them bring their marketing in-house to ultimately achieve what we call sales and marketing mastery. This event series is meant to help you break free from what we call the "but we're different" mindset, because today is the first edition of what we are calling "But We're Different Live." We are doing these every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. But We're Different Live. And the goal of these is that every time we have one of these, we're going to be sharing a different lesson with you to help you drive better sales and marketing results, all in-house. In other words, never dependent on an outsourced marketing agency for your growth. My promise to you is that you're always going to leave with actionable takeaways that you can do immediately to better your current marketing and sales strategies. The first half, I'm going to address a topic here with my co-host Nick, and the second half will be an AMA. So for those of you who are here, we want to hear from you. We encourage you, just shoot a ping to Nick or put it in the chat. We absolutely want to hear from you. Dialogue is encouraged. We'd love to see cameras on. If you have any relevant questions or comments during the talk, you can use the raise hand function. I'm happy to call on you. Otherwise, you can drop your question in the chat and we will get to it at the end. And so we just thank you all for being here. We know there's many things that you could do with this hour in your day, but the fact that you're spending with us means a lot to us. And so today, we are going to be talking about how to break free from the "but we're different" mindset, how that really shows up in our organizations, how we can break free of that so that we can earn more trust in the marketplace. And as we get into this, I have an important question that I want us all to consider. You may not have pondered this question before, but now's a good time. I want you to think about how over the past, let's say 5 or 10 years, your customer has changed in the way that they prefer to buy, shop, and make decisions in your marketplace. This could even be, how have your job candidates changed in the way that they assess job roles or jobs within your industry? How have your vendors changed, perhaps, in the way they prefer to do business? How have donors changed, perhaps, if you're a nonprofit? What are some of the major ways that they have changed in the way they prefer to buy, shop, and or make decisions? You're free to drop that stuff in the chat pane if you're thinking about anything specific. We've asked this question, though, of audiences literally all over the world. And we found there's a few very important and distinct things that almost everybody says, and you're probably going to be nodding your head as I talk about some of these. These are some of the things that most people say. Well, my customer, they get more quotes than they used to, or they tend to shop around a lot more than they used to. They don't talk to 1 or 2 companies. They talk to multiple, or they don't look at 1 or 2 products. They look at 20 different products. They're less trusting of salespeople. In other words, they're wary of making mistakes. They don't want to be in any way manipulated throughout their buying process, and they feel like I want to make as much of this decision as possible. They're less patient. By a show of hands, how many of you are less patient today than you were, let's just say, 5 years ago? Yeah, that's all of us, right? We want to feel like we're in control, that we're empowered to make a good decision for ourselves. We've got more options than we've ever had before in who we want to work with, how we want to work with them, how we buy and shop. We do a lot more research online than we used to. In fact, you've probably noticed this about your customers, is that when they come to you, they are more informed than they used to be. This is kind of a double-edged sword, though, because oftentimes you'll talk to a company, you say, so your customers are doing a lot more research, but are they always educated on the right things? Or is there sometimes misinformation present In other words, they've done their research, but they've actually been misinformed in some way. And finally, for many of us, there's more decision makers involved or more due diligence, which, by the way, I'm not sure when the first time y'all heard that term due diligence before. It used to be associated with like big, real estate transactions or like big investments and things like that, right? Did you do your due diligence? Now you've got two stay-at-home parents talking to each other like about buying a new Ninja blender. And it's like, did you do your due diligence first? Right? It's like, that's how we are now in the marketplace. And we have a lot more decision-making there. The thing is, buyers have changed way more than we realize. And why many of us are focused on keeping up with the competition, trying to be better or different in some way, we lose sight of how the customer is changing, which is interesting because we ourselves are customers and we are changing just as fast. There's a really incredible study we love to talk about here at Impact. Of course, if you're familiar with They Ask You Answer, you know about this study, but we're going to talk about it again because it is so important. Now, this study, it was a study done by Forrester Research Group, and they revisit this study from time to time. Forrester being one of the most prominent market research companies in North America. And what they found is pretty spectacular. In order to understand this study, you need to understand this phrase, zero moment of truth. And here is what zero moment of truth means. This is the moment that you learn that a prospect exists. You are aware of their existence. So they pick up the phone and they call you, or they walk into your store, or they fill out a form on your website. They could have known about you for a while, but this is the moment that you now know that this prospect exists. Boom, zero moment of truth has occurred. Now, what Forrester found is really interesting. They found that on average, 80% of the buying decision is made before the zero moment of truth. So let me rephrase that. Before we're aware that this prospect even exists, they've made a majority of their buying decision already. Now, if we were to go back in time, let's say 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, let's say, what would you guess this number would have been? If it's 80% today, what would you guess this number would have been then? For most of us, we're probably going to guess somewhere in the range of 20 to, let's say, 40%. It's going to be significantly lower. And the reason that we say that is because back then, we didn't have the same access to information. Even if that information existed, the search engines weren't developed enough for us to be able to find that information and therefore make up this much of the buying decision beforehand. So we relied more on salespeople. We relied more on getting things from our friends and family or people we might talk to. That's how we got our information. Now we've got limitless information at our fingertips, and we can make this percentage of the buying decision before that zero moment of truth. And so if we were to say, okay, 10, 20 years ago, maybe this would have been around, let's say 30%. And today we know this is around 80%. The question for all of us is, what is this number going to be in the next 10 to 20 years? If we're looking at the data, we can tell, well, it's probably not going to go back. It's not going to go back to the way that it was. It's very unlikely that we're going to all of a sudden go, you know what, actually, I should just start trusting salespeople more, and I'm not going to do the research. We're always going to be in a position where we want to have the control, feel empowered, and make as much of that buying decision as possible. This is one major way that the world is changing. And we have to recognize that change and understand what it means for our businesses. What's funny about this is that if you say, okay, people are more informed, they're doing more of their decision beforehand, then what happens once they get to that part where now they want to talk to salespeople, now they want to shop for specific things? How would you define a great buying experience as a buyer? Again, we've asked this question of audiences all over the world, and universally across the board, everybody says some variation of the same thing, which is, I want to find what I want, and I want to find it fast. I want to find what I want, what's the right fit for me, and I don't want to waste a bunch of time doing it. Now, this applies to not only the buying experience, but this applies to finding content. This applies to finding a product or service. This applies to finding a dentist. In some ways, this applies to finding a partner in life. We want to find what we want, and we want to find it fast. I asked you all earlier, and we all said, look, we're dramatically more impatient today than we were just 5 years ago. Who is going to bet that is going to go back to the way that it was, right? Everyone in the world says this. Want to find what I want? Find it fast. That brings us to this lovely phrase that we talk about a lot. We don't love the phrase here at Impact, content marketing, because for many people, they don't aspire in their life to be a great content marketer. People don't start businesses, unless you're starting a content marketing company. They don't start businesses and say, I want to be a great content marketer. That's why I got involved with this. That's why I don't particularly love the term. And so we have to redefine the term so we can determine exactly what it means for us. And here's what it means. This is our ability to be the best and most helpful teacher in the world at what we do. So considering that, I want you to ask yourself in your business, do you educate your customer, your vendors, your organizations, your prospective employees on the factors of things like cost and options and who are the best providers? Do you teach about those things better than anybody else in the world? Do you teach in a way that buyers want to learn? Do you meet in a way that they want to meet? Do you sell in a way that they want to buy? That's what this thing, content, should mean for us. It's a way for us to continue to adapt and be the guide, be the teacher for a marketplace that is begging for it. Many of you have heard us talk about the story of Marcus Sheridan and River Pools and Spas. Even if you've heard of it before, I know you love the story just as much as I do, so I'm going to tell you again. Marcus and his company, River Pools and Spas, they started this company back in 2001. Fiberglass swimming pools. You see here in this picture, that's one of a few thousand fiberglass swimming pools his company has installed and manufactured over the years. Things were going pretty good for them when they first started off, but then this date came around, right? The beginning of what many refer to as the Great Recession, October 25th, 2008. Not a great day for a pool company. Now, by the way, this is especially relevant right now because look at what's happening in the world. All right, if you're paying attention to what's happening in the world right now, things are looking very similar. This was a real bad day for a pool company, though, because within 48 hours of that day, his company lost about $250,000 in deposits they were counting on to take them into the off season. Right? People are too afraid, not sure what's happening with the economy, not sure what's happening with the banks, can't buy that fiberglass swimming pool right now. Really bad day. On that day, they talked to 3 different consultants. All said, Marcus, you should file for bankruptcy, but they couldn't file bankruptcy. It wasn't an option for them. Too many people were going to be affected. It wasn't an option for this company to go out of business. They were going to have to figure out a way to generate more traffic, more leads, more sales, more trust than ever before. They couldn't spend any money doing it, and they didn't have a lot of time. And that's when him and his team began to read about this thing called content marketing. Now, they would go on to become the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world, go from a struggling installer of fiberglass swimming pools to one of the largest manufacturers of fiberglass swimming pools, franchise all over the place, sell the company that manufactures the pools. It's been a great story, and they did it through content marketing. But before we get to exactly how they did that, I want you to understand something, is that if you look at history, especially marketing history, it repeats itself. So what happened for him and his company back in 2008 is just as relevant today as it was then, and even the recessions before that. In fact, if you look at the recessions before 2008, like if you look at the recessions of 81 and of 74, and you look at how that affected the way that people spent on marketing, the companies that continued to invest in advertising saw more growth than their competitors did because they shrunk and eliminated their budgets. In fact, in the recession of 81, if you look at the companies that eliminated their advertising budget or maintained it, the ones that maintained it saw a staggering 256% growth over those that stopped advertising. Now, that was marketing then, right? That was marketing. In the 2008 recession, many businesses were debating whether to trust the economy. Advertising spend dropped by about 13%. Yet statistics will show 3.5 times more brand visibility for companies and organizations that maintained their marketing output, just maintained what they were doing. 3.5 times more visibility because despite the fact of what was happening, despite the unrest in the economy, they were going to keep plugging forward. So what does that have to do with our application of content marketing? Again, I want to come back to this. Do you teach in a way that people prefer to learn? Do you meet in a way they want to meet? Do you sell in a way that they want to buy? Are you the best, most helpful teacher in the world at what you do? The problem for many of you that are going to hear this, and I hear it all the time, and that's why it's such a problem, is that you might hear this. You could even look at a company that thrived throughout the last recession because they became obsessed with their customers. And you're going to say to yourself, you're going to think to yourself, yeah, but Zach, we are different. No, we're a B2B service base, right? So this doesn't really apply. No, we're B2G. We do things with the gov. So that makes us different, right? It's not exactly the same. Whatever it is, insert any sort of excuse. Most folks, when they say this though, they don't really understand what they're saying, because here's the thing. What percentage of businesses truly believe that they're different? 100%. Never talked to anybody before that said, yeah, we're just like those other people. The reason we say that is because we want to feel like we're special, and you are special, but not different in one important way. A very important distinction, one thing that ties us all together as businesses, whether it's B2B, B2C, product, service, big, small, I don't care what it is. It's a fundamental emotion that our buyer and our customer has to feel towards us in order to part with their money. And that fundamental emotion is trust. If you really break it down and you look at why would somebody spend money with us or not? Why would somebody pick us over the competition? Why would somebody give us their time and attention versus not? It comes back to this fundamental emotion and varying degrees of trust. The companies today that do the most spectacular things to earn the trust, they're not the ones that are saying, yeah, but we're different. They're the ones that are saying, I get this. I'm in a battle for trust just like everybody else. And I'm not going to stop at anything to do what it takes to earn the trust and be deserving of the trust of my customers. They think to themselves, and I talk with companies like this all day, they think to themselves, can we induce more trust? How do we induce more trust? Today, we're going to talk about literally the things that you can do to generate more trust than anybody, period. But don't put yourself in the corner of, but we're different. That's not how you win it. It's too easy to exclude yourself from this. Just to give you some more examples of this, to keep expounding on this. If we are to think of our pal Google, right, at this point, I think everybody's probably heard of Google. Is that a fair assumption? Yeah, everyone's probably heard of our pal Google. Now, when we go to Google, we go there because we have a question, we have a need, we have a purpose of going there. And we're hoping that when we get there, we get a great answer to our question, that we get the solution, whatever it is that we need. So if we say, okay, Google's purpose is to help me find a great answer. That would be their biggest obsession, is that when I go there, I find a great answer so that I don't go use Bing or DuckDuckGo or whatever these other search engines are, right? They want you to find a great answer so that you stay there. Yet, notwithstanding this fact, so many of us in the last 30 days, I guarantee it, you've gone to Google, you did a search, and you didn't find the answer that you were looking for. It happens all the time. So it's like, what on earth is happening here? Because if Google's biggest obsession is that you would find a great answer to your question, that you would find a solution, yet you go there, you type in your question, you know what your question is, you know what you're looking for, but you don't find a great answer. Why would that happen? It happens because the businesses of the world hadn't bothered addressing that question. And that's a shame. We like to call this, by the way, there is a term for it, ostrich marketing. Because an ostrich, when it has a problem, what does it do? It buries its head in the sand, which is a myth, I believe, but we're going to roll with this anyways, right? It buries its head in the sand, and it's hoping that the problem will go away, but the problem never actually goes away. And so what does an ostrich and ostrich marketing have to do with us? I want you to think to yourself, have you ever received a question from a prospect or a customer, and you said to yourself, or you thought to yourself, we can't address that on the website. We're going to have to wait until we have that nice little face-to-face interaction. because then I'll know more about them, right? Then I can actually answer the question well. Or, then I can kind of skew the answer to exactly what they're looking for, right? We've all said this before. We've thought to ourselves, well, there's just things that we can't address on the front end. But that is the difference between thinking like a business versus thinking like a buyer. Buyer doesn't care what you want to know to answer the question. They just know they want an answer to their question. So if you want to earn the trust, you can't be the ostrich. Can't be the ostrich. So what's the alternative? Well, I'm glad you asked. When Marcus and his team at River Pools and Spas were trying to figure out what the heck they're going to do to save their business, they're finding all of these different terms out there, which in the marketing space, I think we're the most guilty of. There's all these different acronyms and stuff. You can't really tell what the stuff is. If you put this in our context today, it's like AI, chatbots, SEO, right? All these terms that it's like, okay, we kind of hear about it. We don't really know what they mean. For them, they saw all these terms that were coming out back then. And they said to themselves, well, it sounds to me like if we just obsess over the questions that we hear every day and we're willing to answer those the most honestly, the most transparently, most consistently, more than anybody else in the world, we can earn trust. And if we can earn the trust, then we can turn this business around. And then came this beautiful 4-word phrase that has changed so many companies all over the world. And that is, they ask, you answer. And if you boil this down to the most simple explanation, if anyone's ever had the question or asked the question, we must be willing to address it. If anyone's ever had the concern, we've got to be willing to address it. If anyone's had the fear, we've got to be willing to address it in the most honest, transparent, helpful, consistent way possible. That's the ask you answer. Now, what we've also found is that there are 5 subjects that ultimately move the needle. Now, for those of you that have heard about these 5, I actually want you really to press in right now, because these 5 are still the 5 subjects that move the needle in every single industry, regardless of what industry you're in. Yet it's the huge paradox of, we know it's what customers want, but it's also what companies are most scared to talk about, especially on the website, especially on the front end. These 5 things are cost, problems, comparisons and verses, best of or best in class, and reviews. So if we talk about cost, right? This is like this is still a taboo subject in 2023 right now. I don't know why that would be, because we know people are so obsessed over it. But again, this is the way we've been trained to think. I want to know as much of this on the front end as possible. Okay? But most people will say, yeah, but we're different, Zach. We can't talk openly and honestly about that because of X, Y, and Z. Problems. These are things, I know you and I have had experiences before where you're shopping for a service or a product and you just want to know what you're getting into. You know everything has problems. You know there's downsides to everything. You know everything's not a great fit for everybody, but you want to be familiar with those problems. Yet you can't find information, especially not honest information about it. Again, this is where companies say, yeah, but Zach, we're different. If we talk about our problems, it's not going to earn the trust. Comparisons and verses. Everybody on planet Earth compares things before they buy it. I don't care where you go. We're all comparing stuff. We want to make sure we're getting the right thing for us. We want to know that we've assessed all of the options, that we've walked through the right logic before we pick what we're going to buy. Yet again, most companies are going to say, yeah, but we're different. We can't compare ourselves to the other competitor. We can't compare ourselves to a company that does something different than us. Best in class. How many of you, by a show of hands, have Googled anything best, blah, 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 in the last, let's say, 60 days when you're looking for a product or service? This is how most of us start our buying journey. And here's the funny thing. Oftentimes, if you're anything like me, you don't buy the best. You don't buy the thing at the top of the list. You just want to know what it is. Yet again, a lot of companies say, Zach, yeah, but we're different though. We don't want to talk about the best, especially if we're not the best in a certain category. But this is the great divide here, right? Because in the reality, like we just said, sometimes people don't even buy the best. They just want to know what it is. And so when we come out and actually are the ones that are teaching about the best, we're the ones that are in the trust, even if we're not at the top of the list. And finally, reviews. Everybody wants to see a review about something, or at least know what can I expect when I get into this. They want to know that stuff. Can they find great access to that information? What we've done for the longest time is we said, well, our customers can do the reviews, and that's social proof. So that's like as good as it gets, right? They get to hear it from another customer just like them. But the only problem with that is that if we stop there, we're missing out on major opportunities. We can review our own stuff. We can review other people's stuff. We just have to do it in a way that is honest and transparent and helps that buyer make the decision. But again, a lot of people will say, yeah, but Zach, we're different. Nobody wants to hear our take on this. They want to hear it from other customers. It's not true. It's not true. So ask yourself right now, as I've just went through those 5, how well are we addressing these 5 topics on our website right now? Is there another layer deeper? Is there, are we just getting started here and just need to write 5 articles that are these 5 things? That might be it for you. Nevertheless, these are the subjects that we found time and time and time again are the 5 that move the needle. Like literally, if I look at so many of the companies that I've worked with over the past 5 or 6 years, and in this example, specifically on video content, 99% of the time, their highest performing content is cost-related content. How much does their product cost? How much does the product cost generally in the marketplace? How much should I pay for this? What's the ROI I can get on this? What are things I shouldn't buy? What would be spending too much money? These types of questions, they always perform the best. The greatest thing is that if you address content like this, talking about cost and price, somebody who's talking about cost and price is probably getting ready to do what? They're getting ready to spend money. They're getting ready to make a decision. This is like the closest to the bottom of the funnel you can possibly get. They're in a buying mode already, just in asking this question. Yet so many of us don't take the time to address it very well. Now, with the big 5, these are 5 types of content that you can use that are going to help you, make up a big bulk of that buying decision. There's something else I want to talk about when it comes to the but we're different mindset and really how you become the voice of trust within your space. And I like to call this the guide test, because if any of you are familiar with building a story brand, I love building a story brand. I'm a little bit obsessed with it now because it backs up so many things that I've thought for so many years, and you've thought, I'm sure, which is that people don't really want to work or hire somebody that thinks they're the hero. You want to be the hero, and you want somebody to help you get there. That's the guide, right? You're Luke Skywalker, and you're looking for a Yoda, not the other way around. Yet, think about this. If you put that lens on and you look at so many companies and the way they talk about themselves, they're positioning themselves as the hero, and you're the victim. They're the one that's saving the day, and you're the one with all the problems. Yet, that's not what actually speaks to us. I call this the guide test because literally, if you went to your website today and you looked through, let's just say, the messaging that you have on your homepage, and you did a search this page and looked for things that were we-based. This is how we do things. This is how long we've been around. This is what we do, versus you phrasing. This is what you're looking to accomplish. These are the problems that you're running into. This is ultimately what you're looking for. Whatever it might be, look for the difference between we versus you language. Because so many times I talk with companies and they say, Zach, we do a really great job of talking about our customer and phrasing things in their terms. But they really don't. It's a great test you can do today. Just audit your homepage to see what your messaging is. The reason this happens, though, the reason this exists is a lot of, still to this day, marketing and sales best practices still proclaim that we phrasing is a better approach. They defend it by saying that the word we focuses on collaboration and partnering, while you sounds aggressive and accusatory. But does the data actually back that up? Because I can understand the opinion, but does the data actually back that up? Well, I've looked into this, and we'll put a link to this article that I found that I'd love to share with you. We'll put it in the show notes, and I'll drop it in the chat pane here for everybody. This was an article that was put out on Adweek, and it was written by Tim Reisterer from Corporate Visions, which is, if anybody's familiar with B2B Decision Labs, same company. So they did a study, and more than 47% of respondents said they use we phrasing deliberately to position themselves as a trusted partner. So they use the we. Meanwhile, 40% said they use you phrasing to put the focus on customers and encourage them to take ownership of their challenges and possible solutions. So which one is more effective? Let's look at the data. Working with Professor Nick Lee of the University of Warwick Business School in the UK, Corporate Visions researchers created 2 different studies to examine the impact of changing the pronouns. The first study used a cold email that they sent to unsuspecting prospects who had no knowledge or notion that they needed the product or services from the company sending the email. Now, the goal there was to measure the interest level and urgency to solve the problem being presented. In the second study, a warm communication was provided to these prospects who had expressed interest in a particular solution. So we have a warm and a cold communication. In the cold email, you phrasing was considerably more effective than we phrasing for most of the questions asked, especially those that were linked to interest and intent. For example, participants felt 21% more responsible for solving the express problem in the you phrasing than the we phrasing. Similarly, the audience felt much more strongly, about 13%, that they must take action in the you phrasing condition rather than we. Now that's to the cold audience. Let's look at the second study. The second study created more in-depth content simulating the types of information you might find on a website, landing page, or a piece of marketing or sales collateral. But the results were the same. You phrasing had a stronger impact. So again, you phrasing was considerably more powerful than we for nearly all of the questions, including the most important objectives of a solution presentation, like a convincing case to purchase was up 11%. Likely intention to purchase up 10%. So thought of another way, if you decide to stick with we phrasing, you will present an 11% less convincing case, and your buyer will be 10% less likely to make a purchase. Those are big numbers. That's a huge swing for any of us that are desperate in any way to increase the effectiveness of our messaging. And it's just one simple change, just changing the way that you tell the story, rather than us being the hero who is helping this helpless victim. Instead, understanding we are the guide to this hero who is looking to save the day in their life and whatever you might be doing. So here's how I want you to think differently. Rather than thinking, but we're different, I want you to think about things in these terms. Are you willing to challenge the status quo in your company and in your industry? Are you willing to talk about the problems in the industry? Are you willing to compare yourself to different options? Are you willing to review different things in your industry? Are you willing to challenge those things when a customer who has so many options wants to make sense of what's going on? Are you willing to call out and address bad practices that affect your buyer's experience through the way that you do reviews, or the way that you do best of content, or the way you talk about cost and price? And finally, are you willing to discuss hard topics online before you get to meet with these people? Are you willing to talk about things like pricing and competitors in your content? This is how to actually think different versus just thinking, but we're different. This applies to somebody else. Now's the beautiful part of this, where we get to answer questions from y'all.
I think this one's interesting. So Zach says River Pools is a company in 2008, and it's a B2C organization. So how do I apply this to, I work in a B2B service-based business?
Here's what's interesting. If you look at, let's just take the example. This is a B2C fiberglass swimming pool company. There's a couple things that we know and we can assume about their customers. They don't want to make a mistake, for one, right? We can assume that about their customer. They probably don't want to make a big mistake on this purchase. They want to know that this is an investment that they can trust, right? They want to have a good idea of what they're getting into before they get into it. Okay, so let's just take those 3 criteria alone, and let's think about any of our businesses. Do your customers want to make mistakes in the buying process, or do they want to be well informed? Do they want to make sure that they're spending money in a wise way? In other words, feel like they have actually gone through the proper logic so as to make a decision. This is what for so many of us we're dealing with in our businesses. Our customers are weighed down in indecision because they just don't feel like they've walked through all of the right logic yet. And finally, they want to know what they're getting into. Does your customer want to know what they're getting into before working with you? All right? Do they want to have a good sense as to what this looks like? Even if it's a product, do they want to know what the unboxing is going to look like? Whatever it might be. So for those reasons, River Pools is no different in the way that they need to teach and educate and earn trust than any of us. That's how we need to be thinking about this, right? If you answer yes to those questions, yes, my buyer's concerned about those things, then the principles still apply to you. Great question.
Awesome. We got another one here. It's about best and comparison content. It says basically, won't this just drive my buyers to my competitors?
Great question. Here's the thing. Of course it could. Of course it could. And would they not also have the opportunity to find out about these competitors if they went off and did their own research anyways? Here's the great thing. If we know, they could be weighing the options and they could be looking at one of your competitors. Wouldn't you want to be the one that's having the conversation to talk about how you're different and talk about how each one is a better, a good fit for certain people, but not for others? Wouldn't you want to be the ones to be having that conversation? Better yet, let's say Nick and I, let's say we were both pool dudes and I sold fiberglass swimming pools and Nick sold concrete swimming pools. All right. And now let's say Nicole, she's in the market for a pool. She talks to me first because I'm better, clearly. And she loves my fiberglass swimming pools. She might buy one of my pools, but she doesn't know. And she goes to Nick and says, I met with Zach first, the fiberglass pool dude. I guarantee you, Nick is going to attempt to convince her not to buy my fiberglass swimming pools because he now knows I talked to her first. He's going to talk about all the things that are wrong with my fiberglass swimming pools, how they settle in the ground, how they crack, how they can't come in any shape. He's going to drag me through the mud probably. Right? So I can't stop Nicole from going and talking to Nick. Here's what I could do. All right. So we talked today about fiberglass swimming pools. You're likely going to want to look at others to see what might be a good fit for you. I'm going to give you some content that helps walk you through that. So you can figure out if a fiberglass swimming pool is even right for you. And also here's some other people in the area that you could talk to and what they do best. Now I want to walk you through the same situation. Let's say I gave Nicole that stuff. She goes and talks to Nick. Nick says fiberglass pools suck. Nicole goes, yeah, he already told me what was wrong with them. He actually told me that concrete is a better alternative in some cases. Now let's take a 10,000 foot view at what just happened there. Who earned the trust? The one that was just dragging the other through the mud, or the one that was willing to say, you know what, Nicole, it's good that you're looking at different options. Here's some things that'll help you. I'm the one that earns the trust because I was the one that was the teacher, depending on how I did it, of course. We always run the risk if we're talking about other options of perhaps selling the people on it, but they're going to find out about them anyways. Wouldn't we want to be the ones that help them make a good decision?
Yeah, I was just going to say in 2023, it's the odds of someone not knowing alternatives or your competitors exist. It's just naive to believe that's true and that to not address them, to believe that they don't exist is just not a viable sales and marketing strategy. And so like you had alluded to earlier, right? The best, like people want to know the best, but the best doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you. I mean, if you look at here's an easy example. If you Google best CRM, I guarantee you Salesforce is at the top of most of the lists, but Salesforce is not the best CRM for every single company, especially small, mid-sized companies. They're too expensive. They're too complex. You need an engineer to set it up. Like there's so many reasons why it's not the right thing. And so just like you were talking about, so that's on a B2B software type of sale, on a B2C service or a B2C construction company like you're talking about. So there's a ton of different ways that this plays out.
I'll take it a step further. I tested ChatGPT's ability to make recommendations, and it sucks. It can't make a recommendation to you because it can't form opinions. So here's what I did. I said, ChatGPT, who are the best marketing agencies? And it gave me a list of companies that aren't even marketing agencies. Like, it's not even smart enough to understand what an agency is. It gave me like softwares, gave me all sorts of things. Okay, so it couldn't, not only could it not give me a great recommendation, but it doesn't have the ability to give me an opinion. It doesn't have any sort of experience, of course. What a great opportunity for us as organizations to say, you know what? I know who the players are in my industry. I actually know who does things well and who doesn't do other things very well. I know when to make an informed recommendation versus this AI platform that can't do that. Crying shame is a lot of us are still creating best of lists as though it were created by AI that has no real utility. It's not actually really helpful. We have the ability to do better. So great question.
Awesome. Levon has a great question in the chat just now. Can you give an example of the Wii U in a video presentation on the production of a construction project?
A video presentation on production of a construction project. I can certainly try to give you an example. So let's say here's something simple. The way I start off the video. Here's how it might sound if we were using we. So in this video, we are going to present all of the amazing things that we've developed and come up with to achieve X result with this project. We really hope that we're going to be considered for this project for you or whatever, right? So that might be a start of a teaser of a video that's using we language. Here's you. So if you are somebody who's considering adding X to your construction project, you're probably thinking to yourself, how much is this going to cost me? What's the best and most effective way for me to do this? What are some of the mistakes that I could make in this process? Well, in this video, you're going to learn exactly how to think about this and ensure that you don't make mistakes. Okay, there's just a simple example of something that's not very, very specific. But do you feel the difference, everybody? How different that sounded? That's two things. That's using you language, and it's using the principle of disarmament, which is we're addressing what they're probably thinking now.
Levon likes it. Awesome. Cool. Let's keep rolling. So this one's about pricing. I think this one's probably on a lot of people's minds, is like pricing can get extremely complex with all the different things that affect the cost of our solution. How do you actually display that? How do you actually write about that and put it on your website?
Yeah. I don't think there's a perfect, I don't think there's ever a perfect way to eliminate all of the questions and concerns around cost and price. Even if you can display prices, like even if you can put a price list up, I think it's still not enough, because then how do people really assess as to, if that's a good deal or not? So when you think about cost and price, you got to think about it like this. If I wanted to calculate what something might cost me, what would I have to know, or what would I have to be thinking about? If I wanted to assess why one option is really expensive versus why one option is cheap, do I have the right criteria to understand why there's a big delta? Is it possible that you can give ranges? Is it possible that you can give examples? For instance, if I have something that's really, really complex, first of all, I love that, because now the opportunity for education is amazing. Right? And the more complex it is, the more I can teach about it. But let's say it's really, really complex, and I have like 38 different factors that somebody could consider. I'm probably going to teach this through story. So I'm going to go, here's an example. Let's say you're a company like this, and this is something that's really important to you. This is not quite as important. This part is important. This part is important. And you're looking for this. This is the typical range that you're probably going to find yourself in. Versus, let's say you're this type of person and you're looking for this, not for that, but for this. This is what it might cost you. So now I'm teaching it through a storytelling versus just data and fact and logic. There's always just incredible ways, though, that we can talk about this in different ways and unique ways. Calculators are great, but even if you can spit somebody out an exact price, how do you know they understand value? That's always my question.
It's easy to wrap your head around this concept too when you're talking about like a product, because it's a physical, tangible thing. But when you're talking about a service, it's a lot harder to wrap your arms around it. And so one of the things that we've one of the things that we found is just laying out, and this is something that we do on the Impact site too, and something that we've worked with businesses to do, is that we just help you articulate what are the things that make it, like, where do we start? What are the things that make it the price go up? What are those factors? If this was going to end up being a really expensive solution for someone, what would be included in that? If what would need to be true in order for us to keep the cost down, to be able to still do the thing to solve the problem? And so helping people understand what that range is, and like Zach's point, it's going to help you add context to the different aspects of what you do, and add context to all the different value points that you have. So it's not so ambiguous.
I love how you're saying this, because we might not be able to give a price, but can we address the question? The answer, of course, is yes. We can give factors. We can give things. If we can't give a price, maybe that's okay for your buyer, but we need to at least address the question, which is how much does it cost, or what can I expect in terms of an ROI, or whatever the cost or price sphere is.
Also, the fastest way to drive your buyers to your competitors is if they come to you looking for a solution that you offer and they can't find it, they don't sit there and hunt around, right? Like I know I don't do this. No one I've ever talked to has done this. You don't sit around and look for it. You just go bounce back to Google and you keep typing X, Y, and Z pricing, cost. Somewhere along the way, you will find some resemblance of an answer, and whoever's putting that information out there is usually going to get first contact.
Yep.
So it's a huge, huge, huge opportunity.
I want to address Ahmed's question in the chat pane. So he says, how can I do the Hero Hub and hygiene content good? So that's the first time I'm seeing hygiene. So I've heard Hero Hub and I forget what the other H is. Google came out with this like framework, Ahmed, which you might be referring to. I very much see, Ahmed, they ask you answer content as help. That's the other H. Help content. So Hero Hub help. Hero content is like that stuff. That's like a Super Bowl ad, right? That's like the thing you put a lot of money into. It's a big campaign. It's content that you go to market with to make a big splash. And it's more of an awareness thing. Help content is like what we're talking about. It's the stuff that helps people navigate a buying process, and it's a utility to them. So they find it when they need it. Hub content is like programmable content, like we're doing right now. So this would be an example of programmable content. This is a place you can come and you're going to get some cool stuff about sales and marketing. And it's not necessarily going to be like a search thing. Like you're not going to find perhaps this particular episode because you search for it, but it's in a programmable type of catalog, if you will. So Ahmed, great question. It's been a long time since I've talked about those three types of content, but if anybody wants to look that up, it's from Google. I think it's pretty useful.
Awesome. Beth, did you want to come up and ask your question to Zach?
Yeah, so I do marketing for a business consulting company. And so obviously there's a lot of education that has to be done for the customer, and you can't necessarily provide all of it at one time. So do you think that providing assessments on your website for the customer, basically kind of to educate themselves on what they need, and then also to help you sell more than what they ever realize that they might need, is a better way to educate them? Or do you think that it is more complex for the customer's mind to actually comprehend?
Yeah. So when you say assessment, do you mean like you're trying to help them configure a solution that would be a good fit for them?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, good question. So I like to think about this as you've got, let's say, thought leadership type content that you can go to market with. And it's like, here's how we view business consulting, and here's like problems with certain ways of consulting, and here's comparisons of different things like that. You've got this other side, which is allowing people to navigate through that stuff quicker. It's really all it is. So if, for instance, let's use a totally different example, but it's one that everybody can relate to. Like if you're shopping for furniture, you go to a furniture website, you like all the options are there. You can look at reviews, you can look at pricing, you can look at everything is right there at your fingertips. It's incredibly overwhelming, right? There's so much there. So actually the most useful thing we can do in that case is we can ask people questions that they might not think to ask. Like, how many people do you have in your family? Do you have a robot vacuum that, it needs to go under your furniture? like things like this, things they would never think about asking, and give them an assessment that they would never be able to get unless they talk to somebody. That's incredibly valuable, right? They're going to value that recommendation. And you helped them skip the long, intensive process of looking at all of the options and doing all of the research. So to get back to your initial question, assessments are great. Quizzes are great. The only problem that I see with them is that sometimes they're so basic and generic. It's like, this wasn't really helpful. Like I could have probably figured this out on my own. You got to have questions that really make people go, I never thought about that before. And therefore they're going to value the result much more.
It's just a hard balance with lead generation because you don't want to ask too many questions that obviously they bounce away, but you want to get enough effective information that they feel like they're getting some value from it. So it's definitely a hard balance.
Yeah. One thing that I found personally, Beth, is anything you can do to show that they're making progress through it will help people get to the end. Right. So when they know there's 5 steps versus when they just don't know how many steps there are, you're going to get more to the end. Or if they have a good sense as to what the result will look like if you can show the email that they're going to get that shows the score or shows the recommendations, now they can see the end and they're going to be much more likely to go through it. So just a couple of things to keep in mind.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. We got one here from Patty. Hey, Patty.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, Patty.
My question has to do with the product that I market. It's Medicare, so it's highly regulated. We're not really, can't talk about price overall because it's determined by where the person lives. It goes by zip code generally.
Mm-hmm.
I have 1 million competitors in my field. They're all selling the same thing. They're also selling by zip code. So my instinct is to market my agency instead of the product, and why we're better at this and we have the expertise in this field. I guess my question is, I can't address cost on the big 5, but I can say that we give the customer more choices. So we offer them competitive pricing. So I'm addressing that in that way. I'm not sure how to address the problems and the comparisons, really. I mean, I guess compared to other agencies, of course, I'm going to say we do it better. We're smarter, we're more efficient. I can say all those things, but really not sure about, the problems.
Yeah. So what I like to do, Patty, is I like to go, okay, I'm going to take my business hat off and I'm going to put my buyer hat on, and I'm going to think about them and what they would want. So, is problems the specific one that you're stuck on? Because I actually have some ideas for cost and price that I think we should dive into.
Well, all of them really. I mean, because you're dealing with people 65 and over.
Yep.
They're kind of like flooded with marketing, so they're already kind of like,
yeah,
this Medicare marketing. So you're already up against like a lot of negativity with the buyer.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the great thing about that, Patty. The fact that you've recognized that, you can address it, right? It's addressing the elephant in the room that nobody else is talking about. So, if you've looked into Medicare and you've ever been frustrated with the amount of information that's out there, we're going to help you with that. In this article, we're going to talk to you. We're going to address as much as we can around cost and price, even though we can't give exact numbers. You should be familiar that in some cases, you're going to pay more if X, Y, or Z happens, or you work with a company like X, Y, or Z. You're going to pay less if you work with one of these types of companies, if you have this type of thing. I'm speaking in really gross generalities. You might be in a position, Patty, where maybe you can't actually have dollar signs in the article. But could you go a little bit further than what they're finding out there and they're so confused about, right? It's just like, if I came to you today, Patty, and I said, I talked with one company and this is like some of the costs and stuff that they gave me, and it seems like a lot. Then I talked to this other one and they looked the same, but for some reason this costs less and like the features are different. Could you give me an answer as to why? So we're trying to do that at scale, Patty. So that somebody would be able to read that, the factors that affect it. Yeah. Like you said earlier, you already said a couple of them earlier. You said it's mainly dictated by perhaps their zip code. And you said another thing. Boom, talk about that. That would be helpful for me.
Thank you.
Yeah. But like I said, Patty, I think you have a huge opportunity here to be the one that addresses the elephant in the room, right? If you search for this stuff, you might find there's a lot of conflicting information. It's confusing. We're going to make this easy for you because you deserve to have the right care and be confident you're making the right decision.
Got it.
Just to go one level deeper here, Zach, when you type into Google, how much and you put the letter M, the first thing that comes up is Medicare cost.
Yeah.
So like, there's a huge opportunity here. And like Zach spelled this out, but the most effective implementation of this is to say that like exactly how Zach said it. Everyone's going to try and tell you something different. We're going to make it really, really easy and really, really straightforward for you. And while anyone who tells you they can give you an exact price, like they may not be 100% honest and upfront with you about it. And here is why. We need to know all of these things and all of these very individual factors about you in your life in order to give you an accurate cost. So the ranges that you see in other places may not be true or whatever. I don't know anything about Medicare, but that's kind of the way that I would.
See, that's the problem. We don't even know anything about it, Patty. We need your help.
That's true. So
I can wordsmith anything.
Yeah, there you go. And whatever you come up with, Patty, send it over to me. I'd be happy to take a look at it and give you some thoughts.
Cool.
yeah,
Sounds
DM
good.
us on LinkedIn. Would love to see what you're working on.
Sure.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
All right.
coming.
All right, y'all. Thank you all for coming today. We're gonna be back with another episode of But We're Different Live. Not next Tuesday, but the following Tuesday, right, Nicole?
Yep.
Okay.
And we're doing every Tuesday, 3 p.m. starting on February 28th. Nicole's
Yes.
nodding yes. She keeps the minutes around here. Every Tuesday, 3 p.m. We're going to do the same thing. So we hope to see you there. Thanks for coming, everybody.